Pokemon Emerald Kaizo is considered one of the most difficult Pokemon games of all time, but is there a team of 6 that can beat the entire game? In today's video, I'm going to break down the best team for Pokemon Emerald Kaizo, so you guys can try to conquer this game yourselves. For anyone unfamiliar with the best team format, these videos consist of a team of 6 that is designed for the overall best performance in a game. This will be based around a starter Pokemon, followed by supporting members to enable the highest chance of success. We'll be covering anything accessible to you on your journey, which would include TMs before the Elite Four, as well as level up moves and any tutors that you can access before completing the game. We'll also be avoiding legendary Pokemon, as that would make things too easy, especially when we're tailoring a team to counter the region. Make sure to comment your thoughts on today's team below, and if you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. But before we begin, today's video is sponsored by Audible. If you're out of the loop, Audible is a service provided by Amazon, which has spent many years now becoming the top option in audiobooks and spoken word content. From recently released books to absolute classics, their service offers something for everyone who has a hunger for some amazing audio content. I mean, hey, even if you're just into stuff like podcasts, well, Audible has you covered there. There are thousands of different podcasts available covering dozens of topics. Truly a never-ending treasure trove of content. You guys will all want to know all about their tremendous Words Plus Music series as well, which I'd highly recommend getting into. I mean, come on. If all the content they offered wasn't enough, you even get to keep any one title that you choose from the whole catalog. Speaking of things in the catalog, today I'd like to suggest you indulge in The Boys Deeper and Deeper. I gave it a listen, and it encouraged me to check out Amazon's The Boys Show, which was definitely pretty nuts. Audible will often have some nice tie-in podcasts and audio experiences that can introduce you to many different topics in media, and this was no different. So if you're already a fan of The Boys, or want to just experience the weird tales of a fishman, as well as many other bits of content, then go over to audible.com/MysticUmbreon, or text Mystic Umbreon to 500-500 and get yourself access to a free trial of Audible. Thanks again to Audible for sponsoring this video. And now, on to the video. With our best team for Emerald Kaizo, we have to first start off with our starter for the games. Our choices are Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip. For Emerald Kaizo, there's only 2 that actually are viable though, as Mudkip is actually really hard countered by a majority of bosses. Even gyms like Flannery have teams that consist of coverage to Oko's Swampert, so we are really choosing between Torchic and Trico here. I think ultimately it's easier to build a strong team around Sceptile, as its role is rather unique in these games as a strong response to rain, which is absolutely terrifying in the later portions of the game. Sceptile should run Leaf Blade, Frenzy Plant, Crunch, and Dragon Claw. Leaf Blade is your primary stab of choice, and will be used in most of your matches. But Frenzy Plant is amazing for the bulkier Pokemon such as Tyranitar, Lapras, Milotic, and many others. Crunch and Dragon Claw are the best special coverage option Sceptile gets, as Crunch is great to at least be a neutral option for the Steel Psychics, while also handling threats such as Gengar that will pop up. Meanwhile, Dragon Claw is amazing for the opposing dragons, that besides Flygon will be 4 times resist to your grass moves. Leaf Blade and Dragon Claw are level up moves, whereas Frenzy Plant and Crunch are now move tutors that you can obtain with heart skills. The game gives you a ton of them as hidden items, and adding these moves to your set is vital to OHKOing the later portions of the game. Early on, using Cut to obtain the Miracle Seed also adds to your damage output, especially if you keep using Sceptile and Overgrow Rage. As far as your nature goes, you'll probably want Timid, as you'll be using special attacks. However, Naive is strong for the earlier game before you get your special coverage options. Sceptile is going to basically be your strong special offensive option, and with Hoenn having so much water, Sceptile will be a destructive option in these games. Moving on to our next Pokemon, in my eyes, this truly is going to be the strongest Pokemon on your team. You find this Pokemon not only extremely early in your journey, but it's also going to outright solo a majority of battles, or at least take out half the opponent's team on its own. For our next encounter, I recommend going for the 1% Taillow. You can find Taillow on Route 103, and it's able to annihilate most bosses. Besides rock and steel types, Taillow is able to destroy everything that comes its way. Thanks to its high speed and the ability Guts, even common flying checks struggle to take on Swallow. Compared to other flying types, nothing else comes to Swallow besides something like Salamence, which you'll be waiting till near the end of your journey to even obtain. Swallow's moveset is actually very easy to obtain, as its moveset consists of Facade, Air Slash, Quick Attack, and Endeavor. You'll almost exclusively use Facade, as long as you make sure to pre-status Swallow before matches. This can be fairly easily done, as there's a lot of early route options with status, such as Static Mareep. However, your best goal is to burn on Flame Body Pokemon such as Magby, as Guts will negate the drop from Burn. However, Poison Point Pokemon also work for this job. These Pokemon are all found in the early grass, with Mareep being on Route 103, meanwhile Magby is in Oldale Town. The difference in damage output is astronomical, as not only will Guts boost your damage for physical moves, but also Facade gets a boosted damage output while you're statused as well. The speed with the 21 speed IV is crucial as well, because this is important for outpacing some Pokemon in the Elite Four, such as Steven's Deoxys, or a majority of the slower base speed weather Pokemon, such as Exeggutor and Gorbis. Overall, Swallow is one of the most destructive Pokemon you can add to your team. Our final Pokemon for the early game is going to be one of our team's strongest defensive backbones. Not many Pokemon have both strong defenses and a reliable recovery move in this game. The next Pokemon we will be adding to our team will be Slowbro. The team currently needed a switch in for fires, at least for a defensive standpoint. Slowbro is capable of at least taking a single hit from fire types, even if they have coverage such as Thunderbolt or Solar Beam. Not only this, but as far as other weaknesses go, Bug and Ghost are typically unable to knock out Slowbro in a single hit because of its high defensive stat. Slowbro's best moveset consists of Slack Off, Surf, Psychic, and Ice Beam. Ice Beam can be easily purchased at the game corner for 8,000 coins, and you'll actually obtain 99 copies of this move, which we'll be teaching to a few more Pokemon down the line. Surf you'll naturally obtain after Norman just by completing the story itself, so you won't have to do anything special here. Slack Off and Psychic you'll actually just obtain from level up. The coverage is extremely useful, as Ice Beam is amazing for both dragons and grass types, while the stab combination has few Pokemon that actually resist both moves. Slack Off will be your method of recovery, since even if you aren't doing a hardcore Nuzlocke, Emerald Kaizo will not allow you to use potions or other items mid-battle unless you're already holding them. Slowbro having Slack Off is a distinct advantage you'll have over a majority of other Pokemon in the gen, as you can recover against a majority of physical attackers. Slowbro's job is just meant to allow your team an option to take on most offensive threats, and deal damage back with one of its offensive options. While there's other useful options, such as Thunder Wave and Yawn, a lot of bosses have multiple Lumberries, which make these inferior to actual coverage moves in my eyes. Those three Pokemon will be your entire team until you've gotten to Slateport, where you'll gain access to Lantern. Lantern is an essential piece to your team for a few battles as your electric switch in. While a ground type would typically be sought after, Lantern is able to not only take on electric types, but also rain sweepers that happen to have thunder as well. Also, a lot of the ground types you'd find have the same issues as Swampert did for a starter, being the fact most electrics will have hidden powers that OHKO ground types you'd encounter, while also not being fast enough to actually ever use a ground move against electrics you'd encounter. While Lantern is your second water type, Slowbro and Lantern will be used for vastly different Pokemon. Lantern's moves are fairly easy to obtain. We've already gone over how to obtain Surf and Ice Beam during your journey. Meanwhile, Thunderbolt and Hydro Pump are both level up moves for Lantern, and will allow you to get strong options for both of your stabs. Since Surf, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam tackle a majority of Pokemon anyway, I figured the last move slot for Hydro Pump was fairly valuable as a higher damage option on Lantern, and you'll obtain it from leveling up anyway. Ideally, you should be able to get the ability Volt Absorb, since this will allow Lantern to actually switch into the electric attacks I mentioned previously. Any sort of defensive nature here should allow Lantern to switch into opponents. And honestly, there's benefits to both a physically or specially defensive Lantern. A bold nature helps Lantern switch around flying attacks while taking less. Meanwhile, using a calm nature will be better for fire types. Either way, Lantern will be a vital part to the middle portion of your game, since Sceptile can only do so much as a water type check when there's a plethora of rain teams along your journey. Moving on to our 5th Pokemon, this will actually be our final one until the endgame. With our previous 4 Pokemon, we should actually be able to cover a fair majority of opponents that will come across our way in this game. And having a strong general response to offensive threats we'll encounter, our 5th Pokemon on this team will be none other than Wobbuffet, which we can actually obtain from an egg once arriving in Lava Ridge Town. Wobbuffet is an essential part of any Elite Four run in Emerald Kaizo, while also being a valuable Pokemon thanks to Shadow Tag with its incredible bulk. Most people think of trapping Pokemon as basically trading one Pokemon for another, but in Emerald Kaizo, Wobbuffet can honestly usually claim 2 or 3 kills in a single battle. While Wobbuffet only has a handful of moves to even choose from, it's really hard to go wrong with using one on your team. Wobbuffet's entire moveset is obtained through level up, so this should actually be a fairly easy moveset to obtain at least. Basically, you'll want to typically utilize Counter and Mirror Coat. However, Encore and Safeguard have their uses as well. Encore is great if you can lock your opponent into a damaging move in order to guarantee damaging them with Counter or Mirror Coat respectively. Or if they lock into a status move, you can take this time to go into another Pokemon to take out the opponent. I typically use this strategy against Calm Mind users by locking them into Calm Mind and then defeating them with Swallow, as it's a physical attacker. Safeguard's nice against bulkier Pokemon such as Shuckle and Dusclops, especially around the middle of the game, which typically rely on Toxic to damage you. With the ability Shadow Tag on top of these moves, you can typically ensure the opponent will end up attacking you with the move that will not only fail to KO Wobbuffet, but will also lead to your opponent taking themselves out. Our final Pokemon we actually won't obtain until Pseudopolis City, as we actually need to unlock the Cave of Origin. This Pokemon is actually essential to Elite Four runs though, as it's such a destructive option against a majority of teams from this point on. Our final team member will be none other than Dusclops. Dusclops got a severe buff to its stats in these games, with bulk consisting of 90 HP and 130 in both defenses, while also having an increase to its attack, which is now base 100. With Ghost being a physical type in these games, having the 100 attack is phenomenal, especially with such incredible bulk. Dusclops' moveset is actually fairly easy to obtain. We've already gone over Ice Beam, and Shadow Ball should actually be a starting move for Dusclops. If yours doesn't have Shadow Ball though, you can actually also obtain this in the game corner. I noticed when doing this, it was for some reason showing under TM24, despite Shadow Ball being TM30 in this game, but it's regardless still a fairly easy TM to obtain. Earthquake you'll encounter while going through Seafloor Cavern. Finally, Shadow Sneak can be taught on your Dusclops with the Heart Scale, which as mentioned earlier, you should be able to find several of. The Brave Nature is mostly to boost your damage with Earthquake plus your Ghost attacks, while not weakening either of your defensive stats or Ice Beam's damage output against a lot of the late game Dragon types. We'll use a Citrus Berry instead of a Mago Berry here however, since due to your negative speed nature, you'd actually confuse yourself if you ate the berry. With this moveset, Dusclops can claim multiple kills against nearly every late game battle you'll face. Before going into matchups though, I do quickly want to go over why Dusclops specifically has to be on this team, despite my typical dislike for extremely late encounters. Unlike Pokemon such as Garchomp or Salamence in other mainline games, Dusclops is actually a nearly mandatory piece in any Elite Four run for these games, against Pokemon such as Deoxys Attack, Latios, Latias, and even Mewtwo. While having only 5 Pokemon for most of your run sounds like a bad idea, the first 5 should be able to actually handle this journey if you're careful. Pokemon like Salamence and Garchomp, while strong candidates, can typically be substituted for other early game Pokemon. Even with this team, I actually opted to swap out Salamence for Swallow, as Swallow was still a strong offensive option for opposing grass types, and I didn't need to wait until the end of my run to use it. Now, with that said, how do the other matchups go with this team? Well, as far as rival battles go, this team should actually be able to breeze past any. May's teams are actually incredibly weak, and I typically swept through most of her Pokemon with Swallow in order to take her out. Her final team consisted of Miltank, Meganium, Blastoise, Ampharos and Nidoqueen, which as long as you make sure to burn Swallow in advance, this fight should be a breeze. Wally actually only has one prevalent fight, and it's in the Victory Road. His team consists of Meganium, Hitmontop, Raichu, Vaporeon, Blissey, and Gardevoir. This team was fairly easy to take on, with Lantern, Swallow, and Dusclops handling the majority of this battle. I had to bank on predicting Gardevoir to use Thunderbolt instead of Calm Mind on my Wobbuffet to win the battle though. But you could also probably just preserve Dusclops until later in the match in order to handle Gardevoir, as it's a severe threat to this team. Our final rival is Red, who until the very last match also actually has fairly weak teams. Red's final team, though, is monstrous, consisting of Ho-Oh, Celebi, Mew, Lapras, Snorlax, and Dragonite. Dusclops is going to be a vital piece to actually standing a chance here, but if played well, should be able to at least take out one of, if not both, the Celebi and Mew. I ended up needing to use everything besides Wobbuffet to beat Red, but thankfully the team found this fairly manageable. As far as gym leaders go, this team should be able to handle a majority of them with ease. The hardest one would by far be Roxanne, who is widely considered one of the hardest matches in all of Emerald Kaizo. Her team consists of Nosepass, Anorith, Relicanth, Shuckle, Lunatone, and Lileep. This Lileep is actually the only real struggle in this battle, as it's actually really broken against most early game Pokemon. Without picking Blaziken, you are basically limited to obtaining a Makuhita or Slugma in this slot, which will end up being fairly useless for a majority of later game battles. Outside of this battle, you should honestly be able to breeze through most other gym leaders. Brawly, Watson, and Flannery were all honestly cakewalks for me. Swallow actually dominated all three of these battles with very little assistance from other Pokemon on the team. Watson's team was the trickiest, but by this point you should have Lantern with Volt Absorb to handle the bulkier Pokemon such as Ampharos and Manectric, whereas Grovyle can at least do enough damage to Lantern for Swallow to clean up. Starting with our later half teams, these actually switch over from single battles to double battles. Norman's team consists of Slaking, Espeon, Kangaskhan, Swallow, Tauros, and Snorlax. Espeon will always try to skill swap Slaking turn 1, so I recommend leading off with Swallow here and targeting Espeon immediately in order to prevent it from allowing Slaking to lose its Truant. Otherwise, while this battle will certainly be close, your team of 5 should be able to overcome, as Slowbro plus Wobbuffet handle a majority of this team with ease. Winona was the hardest gym leader for me in the later half, consisting of Aerodactyl, Zapdos, Moltres, Articuno, Crobat, and Flygon. I found leading Sceptile plus Lantern was my best course of action here, as the AI typically targeted Sceptile first. This allowed the combination of Sceptile and Lantern to defeat Aerodactyl, which allows Swallow a few turns to wreak havoc due to nothing else outspeeding you. Even if you just OHKO Zapdos with Swallow, the combination of Slowbro plus Wobbuffet should win this with ease. Tate and Liza were actually the easiest gym I fought in the entire game besides Flannery, despite using Latios, Latias, and Jirachi. I found that leading off with Swallow plus Sceptile here was able to put enough early offensive pressure on their team in order to win with Slowbro and Wobbuffet. Finally, we have both Wallace and Juan. These fights are basically the same, with both running rain teams. Wallace is first, who is our only single battle leader for the late game. The only thing I would say was a bit concerning this battle is the fact Milotic has the ability Swift Swim, which actually did almost become a problem. Thankfully though, Wobbuffet was a really strong response thanks to Mirror Coat. Juan's team was honestly easier due to the fact the strongest rain option was Ludicolo, and I found myself breezing through this with Dusclops and Lantern for the most part. Going into the Elite Four, I did have to play extremely cautiously. This was mainly due to the fact that every match I had to preserve Swallow above all else, even if it meant risking nearly losing the game. This was due to the fact that I needed to ensure it stays burned, as it was my backup response to Deoxys' attack against Steven's team, in case Dusclops fainted while handling Mewtwo or Jirachi. Despite trying to preserve Swallow as much as possible though, I actually found Swallow ended up becoming a strong win con for Phoebe and Glacius teams, while still probably being the MVP of the Elite Four run in my eyes. I had very few issues with this portion of the game. However, I had a couple of scares against Glacia and Steven. Glacia's team has 3 Pokemon with explosion style moves, being Glalie, Regice, and Wailord. The constant fear of losing a Pokemon to these actually really restricted how I was able to play this match, and I actually nearly ended up choking because of it. Steven's team, meanwhile, I actually got fairly cocky against. Until the Jirachi came out. I mentioned needing Dusclops potentially to handle Mewtwo or Deoxys attack, and I actually had to use Dusclops for the combination of Mewtwo and Metagross in this battle. Because of this though, Jirachi actually had a lot of time to try to flinch my Lantern, which I ended up actually using to handle this instead. Thankfully though, despite nearly losing my entire E4 run to the Flinchmaster Jirachi, I was able to use Slowbro to handle Jirachi, just barely taking its Thunderbolt to secure the win here. The only other battles in this game that are even somewhat notable are the Team Aqua and Magma battles. The strategy for these is honestly fairly simple, and it basically comes down to utilizing the same tricks to beat Juan and Wallace, being a major reliance on Sceptile, Lantern, Swellow, and Wobbuffet. Swellow is amazing for the weather Pokemon you'll fight. Meanwhile, Sceptile is useful for bulky water and ground types, as well as Maxie's Tyranitar. As for Lantern and Wobbuffet, these are going to be your team's best walls for these matches. So that's our team to defeat one of the hardest ROM hacks to date, Pokemon Emerald Kaizo. If anyone's looking for a way to conquer this monstrosity of a ROM hack, I genuinely believe this team's the best way to do so. But let me know in the comments if you have other Pokemon you recommend. There's a lot of Pokemon that can definitely be worthwhile to use in this game, so I'd love to see what you guys used.